It was a cold Friday morning, December 14, 2012. The small town of Newtown, Connecticut lay quiet beneath a pale winter sky. The roads were still damp from the night frost, the air heavy, still, and strangely calm. In the suburban neighborhoods, Christmas decorations flickered in windows, lights blinking faintly against the dawn. The scent of pine and chimney smoke drifted lazily through the air as parents prepared their children for school. No one could have imagined the horror that was quietly forming just a few miles away. At a tan-colored colonial home on Yogananda Street, 20-year-old Adam Lanza was awake long before the sun rose. His mother, Nancy Lanza, lay asleep in her bed upstairs. Their relationship had long been strained. But on that morning, the distance between them was more than emotional. It was fatal. Investigators would later piece together fragments of Adam's mind, an isolated, reclusive young man, withdrawn from society, obsessed with mass shootings and weapons, haunted by untreated mental illness. He had been diagnosed in childhood with Asperger's syndrome, anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive traits. He rarely left the house and communicated mostly through online forums. Nancy, his mother, had tried for years to help him, homeschooling him, managing his sensitivities, protecting him from the outside world. But in doing so, she also gave him access to something else. Her growing collection of firearms. Nancy was a gun enthusiast. She often visited shooting ranges, sometimes taking Adam with her. Friends said she believed it was a way for him to build confidence and control. At her home, she kept multiple weapons, legally purchased, properly registered, a Bushmaster XM15, E2S semi-automatic rifle, a Glock 20 SF handgun, and a Sig Sauer P226 pistol, all of which would later be used in one of the darkest moments in American history. Around 8 a.m., neighbors heard what sounded like a single sharp crack echoing through the cold air. Most assumed it was someone chopping wood or maybe a car backfiring. But it wasn't. Adam had just shot his mother 4 times in the head while she slept. He then carefully covered her body with a blanket, took her car keys, and loaded her weapons and ammunition into the black Honda Civic parked outside. By 8 a.m. and 30 minutes, he was driving through the quiet streets of Newtown, heading towards Sandy Hook Elementary School, a small, close-knit school that had 456 students enrolled from kindergarten through 4th grade. Teachers were decorating classrooms for the holidays. Children were learning songs for the upcoming winter concert. It was a place of safety, laughter, and innocence. The drive from Yogananda Street to the school was just over 5 miles, about 8 minutes of winding roads through the woods. The car's interior was silent except for the faint ticking of the turn signal as he pulled into the school's parking lot around 9 a.m. and 30 minutes. At that moment, the first wave of normal morning activity was underway inside. The school doors were locked at 9 a.m., sharp every day, part of a security system installed months earlier. Visitors were required to be buzzed in by the staff through a video intercom. But Adam didn't wait for permission. He stepped out of the car wearing black clothing, a tactical vest, and earplugs, carrying the Bushmaster rifle. He approached the entrance and shot through the front glass doors, shattering them in seconds. The sound thundered through the hallways, startling teachers and students. Inside, Principal Dawn Hochsprung and school psychologist Mary Sherlock were in a meeting with other staff members. Hearing the commotion, they rushed toward the main hallway, trying to confront the intruder. They were the first to die. Both women were shot as they attempted to stop him. Another teacher, Natalie Hammond, was struck by bullets but survived by crawling into a nearby room and locking the door behind her. From there, the chaos spread like a shock wave. The school's intercom had been accidentally left on after the morning announcements. The sound of gunfire echoed through every classroom. Teachers, realizing what was happening, scrambled to protect their students. Some barricaded doors with bookcases, others hid children in bathrooms, closets, or behind desks. In classroom 8, substitute teacher Lauren Rousseau had just begun her day with 15 first graders. When the shots came closer, she tried to gather the children into a corner, but Lanza entered moments later. In a matter of seconds, 14 children and Lauren were killed. Across the hall, in classroom 10, teacher Victoria Soto heard the noise and quickly led her students into a closet and small bathroom. When Lanza entered, she told him the children were in the gym. He shot her instantly. 6 of her students tried to run. 5 were killed before they reached the hallway. 7 others survived, hidden behind the closet door, trembling in silence. Within less than 5 minutes, 20 children, all 6 and 7 years old, and 6 adults lay dead or dying. The entire event inside the school lasted roughly 11 minutes from the first shot to the last. At 9 a.m. and 35 minutes, the first 911 calls reached the Newtown police. Callers described loud pops, screaming, the smell of gunpowder. Dispatchers immediately alerted local and state police. Within minutes, patrol cars were speeding toward the school. At 9 a.m. and 40 minutes, the first officers arrived on scene. They could hear gunfire from inside. As the police entered the building, the shots stopped. In a final act, Adam Lanza turned one of his pistols on himself. When officers reached classroom 10, they found his body near the doorway. He had fired 54 rounds from the rifle in under 5 minutes. Outside, a scene of disbelief unfolded. Teachers led crying children by the hand across the parking lot to the nearby firehouse, the designated evacuation point. Parents arrived frantic, running toward the building, desperate for any news. Some were reunited with their children, others waited for hours, only to be told their sons or daughters would never come home. By 10 a.m. and 30 minutes, the school was surrounded by emergency vehicles. SWAT teams cleared classrooms one by one. The entire town seemed to fall under a heavy silence, broken only by sirens and sobs. Later that afternoon, the death toll was confirmed. 20 children, 6 adults, and the shooter himself. Among the victims were teachers who died shielding their students, children whose birthdays were just days away. It was a tragedy so immense that words seemed inadequate. When President Barack Obama was briefed, he paused for a long moment before responding. At 3 p.m. and 15 minutes, he addressed the nation from the White House press room. His voice broke as he spoke. Our hearts are broken today for the parents, the grandparents, sisters, and brothers of these little children. They had their entire lives ahead of them. In Newtown that night, candles flickered in windows across every street. Churches opened their doors. People prayed together, hugged strangers, wept in silence. In a town where nothing violent had ever happened, the sound of sirens had been replaced by the sound of grief. No one could understand the question echoing in every heart. Why? Why would anyone do this? Why here? Why children? The answers would take months to piece together, buried deep within the shattered mind of one young man and the fragments of a nation that would never again feel the same. He arrived at the school grounds at approximately 9 a.m. and 30 minutes. The morning light hung low across the parking lot of Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, the air crisp, quiet, and normal. Teachers were greeting children, 9th graders or 1st graders tugged at backpacks, parents waved. The school day was settling into routine. Then it shattered. As he pulled his mother's black Honda Civic into the lot, Adam Lanza had already killed the one person he'd loved and feared most, his mother. Earlier that morning, he had shot her because in his mind she had become an obstacle. He stripped her of her weapons, loaded ammunition, and left the home where he had grown up, isolated, angry, and untethered. Then he drove the winding roads of Newtown, navigated the wood-lined lanes, and pulled into the school lot. The front doors of Sandy Hook were locked at 9 a.m. every day, part of a security protocol implemented to protect the children. The video intercom system buzzed visitors through one by one. But Lanza didn't wait. He carried a Bushmaster XM15 E2S assault-style rifle, 2 pistols, body armor, ear protection, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition at his back. Among them, a Glock 20 SF and a Sig Sauer P226. He had come prepared. At about 9 a.m. and 34 minutes, he fired through the glass panels of the locked front door of the school. A single bullet shattered the barrier between innocence and horror. He entered the building. Inside, the morning announcements were wrapping up, children settling in, teachers tidying desks, preparing holiday crafts. The first shots rang out, loud, unignorable, terrifying. Teachers rushed into hallways, students froze mid-song. The principal and the school psychologist sprinted toward the gunfire to confront the threat they paid with their lives. In one hallway, a teacher, hearing the commotion, tried to lock her classroom door. She crawled behind desks, pulling children close. In another, the gunman burst in. A teacher urged the children into a closet, lied to the shooter about their location, then was shot dead, shielding her pupils. The sound of gunfire echoed every few seconds. Bam, 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 bam. The school's intercom, ironically left on, amplified the chaos, carrying the noise into rooms that thought they were safe. According to detailed reports, the spree inside lasted roughly 11 minutes, though to those inside it felt like an eternity. In that time, 54 rounds were fired from the rifle alone. 20 first graders aged 6 and 7 were shot. 6 adult staff members died trying to protect them. The shooter ended his life in the school's hallway before law enforcement advanced. The first 911 call had come in just minutes after the gunfire began. At about 9 a.m. and 35 minutes, dispatchers alerted local police, who converged on the scene within minutes. Outside, parents gathered at the designated evacuation point, a nearby firehouse, confused, frantic, racing toward the school cars, children's names on lips. Some had no idea which door their children had entered. Some arrived too late. A teacher led a class of children across the parking lot, hands linked, small bodies trembling. One moment the carols were being rehearsed for the holiday concert, the next, a blanket of grief settled over the town. The building of Sandy Hook, once alive with chatter, laughter, tiny footsteps, and the shuffle of coats, became a crime scene. Every classroom, every corridor, every closet, corner, and storeroom became part of the investigation. Bullet fragments mapped, door frames examined, shell casings collected. The community, shocked, began to count the missing. 20 children gone, 6 educators gone, 1 young man carrying the weight of what he had done, dead. In the aftermath, the question, why, echoed louder than sirens. Why here? Why children? Why a small school in a quiet town? At the heart of it was the unraveling of a mind. The gunman had arms previously owned by his mother. He had planned his actions for some time, though. Investigators found no definitive motive. He had isolated himself, his intellect and obsessions growing dark, unaddressed. But the victims were ordinary, smiling, playing, dreaming of birthdays, Christmas presents, their futures. For the families of the children and teachers, December 14, 2012 is a line that divides before and after. On the siding of a classroom building, on a hallway wall, on a bookcase pushed against a door to protect young lives, those seconds hold the weight of a lifetime. A teacher hiding children in a bathroom, a child pressing his face into a sweater because the gunfire sounded like thunder, parents' phones vibrating with missed calls because reception in the woods was thin. One of the most poignant stories, a teacher in classroom 10, when confronted by Lanza, told him the children were in the gym, a heroic lie. She died moments later. 7 of her students survived hidden rows behind the closet door. Others ran for the hallway only to be struck down. The shot listening, the silence afterwards, the ticking of clocks in empty rooms. Law enforcement officers arrived to faces of terror. They cleared the building, room by room. Children evacuated, still wearing backpacks, still clutching artwork, still telling teachers they were going to the holiday concert. Outside, the woods stood gentle, trees bare from winter, the usual birdsong gone, replaced by the hum of helicopters, the chatter of police radios, the scrape of boots on pavement. In the days that followed, the physical space of the school remained closed. The building, once a place of education and joy, was shut down. A new structure would be built in its place. But the emotional architecture of Newtown had already been forever altered. Parents were given lists of missing children before they were confirmed dead. Grief counselors arrived. Vigils lit up the town. Flowers, teddy bears, notes piled high in front of the school and in town squares. "Please bring our children home," they read. "We love you," scribbled in children's handwriting. Behind the headlines and the statistics are names. A 6-year-old boy celebrating his birthday in December. A teacher who loved holidays and was decorating windows that morning. A mother who protected her first-grade class with her body. The gunman who once carried hope for college but instead carried weapons. The silence that followed, louder than the bullets. The breach in a locked door. The small boy hidden under a desk. The teacher's hand clamped over a child's mouth. These frames freeze in time. They break hearts. They break lives, and they break the illusion that any school, anywhere, is immune from tragedy. As night fell on Newtown that day, hundreds gathered under starless sky. The lights of the school were off, the parking lot empty. A flag flew at half-mast. From the windows of homes nearby, candles flickered. One of the parents asked, "How do we walk through the front door again?" The answer wasn't simple. Some would try, some wouldn't. But the curriculum had changed. Innocence had been interrupted. In the next chapter, we will follow the immediate aftermath, the evacuation, the family search, the silence of classrooms, and how a town and a nation tried to make sense of the unthinkable. In the quiet crash of morning that followed the nightmare, the town of Newtown, Connecticut stood stunned. The snow-dusted roads outside the school had become the backdrop for a grief far deeper than the winter hush. At 10 a.m. and 30 minutes, as the cold air stilled the steam from cars, perhaps for a moment the town seemed frozen in its tracks, because nothing about that day, December 14, 2012, would ever be normal again. Within hours of the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School, the ripple of mourning spread beyond Newtown. On the same day, Barack Obama, the President of the United States, stepped before the cameras from the White House briefing room. "Our hearts are broken today," he said. For the parents, the grandparents, sisters and brothers of these little children, they had their entire lives ahead of them. He spoke softly, measuredly, offering the condolences of a nation. He paused, and he promised that this time, the pain would not be ignored. Across Newtown, a wave of collective shock moved through schools, churches, homes. The teachers who had survived walked the halls of the building, turned crime scene one final time, helped to gather their colleagues' belongings, watched as law enforcement sealed classrooms, as evidence tags snapped on door handles, as red and white tape wrapped the innocence of those rooms. One post-incident report would describe how law enforcement struggled with the unprecedented nature of the scene. Bullets permanently embedded, children's backpacks untouched, the chairs still at their desks. As day turned to dusk, Newtown citizens gathered in candle-lit vigils. In one moment they were teachers, neighbors, parents. In the next they were mourners of an unimaginable scale. The impromptu memorials that sprung up outside the former school building and around town gathered stuffed teddy bears, handwritten notes, flickering candles, Christmas tree ornaments left behind by children who would never graduate. The community's grief took physical form in every sidewalk crease, every tree limb hung with a ribbon. Then the focus turned to how to heal, how to remember, how to act. Among the first steps was establishing a permanent place of remembrance. A commission was formed to design what would become the Sandy Hook Permanent Memorial. On a wooded site near the school grounds, in a project that began in 2013 and culminated in late 2022, a circle of gray stone and water was built, centered by a young sycamore tree, each of the victims' names engraved around a granite basin. The design symbolized fragility, youth, and the ongoing flow of memory. But design alone did not heal the wounds. The national conversation about gun violence, mental health care, school safety, and policy reform had been reignited, maybe for good this time. Within days of the shooting, the White House announced a task force headed by Vice President Joe Biden and promised meaningful action to prevent more tragedies like this, regardless of politics. Congress and in state legislatures began drafting bills, universal background checks, assault weapons bans, restrictions on high-capacity magazines, increased funding for school safety and mental health services. Some of these bills passed, others did not. For example, the federal assault weapons ban introduced by Senator Dianne Feinstein in early 2013 failed to achieve the supermajority needed in the Senate. In Connecticut, however, the state legislature moved swiftly. By April 2013, the General Assembly passed one of the most stringent gun control packages in the country. The law included universal background checks, a ban on magazines with more than 10 rounds, and tighter restrictions on military-style weapons. While laws changed, the trauma did not vanish. Survivors, first responders, teachers, and families carried their grief forward. The emotional weight of before and after defined the lives of children who were 6 or 7 years old when they walked into their classroom that morning and left into history. One survivor determined, a decade later, to become a therapist to help other children who carry hidden wounds. In the months after the shooting, independent reviews of the law enforcement response criticized certain aspects: how the crime scene was managed, how families were notified, how procedures were not fully in place for an event of this magnitude. While the Connecticut State Police led the investigation, the lessons learned would ripple across police departments nationwide. Meanwhile, the discussion of school safety grew louder. The proposal of placing armed guards in schools, advanced by the National Rifle Association, was widely condemned by teachers and many administrators. Instead, some experts argued for evidence-based violence prevention programs, increased counseling services, improved threat assessment processes, and more open dialogue about mental health struggles. Through all of this, the families of the victims channeled their pain into purpose. Some founded advocacy organizations, such as Sandy Hook Promise, dedicated to preventing gun violence and empowering young people to say something when they see warning signs. More than 9.8 million people have since taken a pledge under their programs. Yet for Newtown, the town itself, the grief remains intimate and immediate. 1 year after the massacre, the local residents of Newtown said they would never be whatever normal is again. The annual carnival, the Christmas parade, the school concerts all carried a shadow of 12/14. The streets still bustled with children, but the town quietly carried the weight of the memories. And memory matters. The memorial above is not only a place of mourning, but a place of reflection and resilience. Visitors walk the paths, pause at the names, trace each name with their finger, leave roses. For survivors, it is a reminder of who they lost, and for many, of the promise they engaged that these lives would not be forgotten and that change would come. In the end, the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary did more than take lives in minutes. It altered a community forever and marked a moment when a nation faced its vulnerability. The conversation it sparked about children's safety, mental health systems, the accessibility of semi-automatic weapons, and the fragility of school as sanctuary continues to this day. In the years that followed December 14, 2012, the impact of the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut has echoed in ways both quiet and profound. The veil between innocence and vulnerability was lifted that morning, and a generation, a town, and a nation had to reconsider what protection, healing, and remembrance truly mean. Some of the survivors, children who were 6 or 7 years old in that first-grade classroom hallway when gunfire erupted, have grown older. They've transformed from tiny learners into teenagers and young adults. But growth has not erased the trauma. Rather, it's who they are now. Many speak of life as happy sad, joyful moments shaded by the memory of what they lost. One survivor described graduation as excited, hopeful, and also heavy. She said, "We worked so hard to get here, but a whole chunk of our class is missing." In June of 2024, about 60 of the survivors of the Sandy Hook shooting graduated from Newtown High School. The ceremony was held without the 20 classmates who should have been there, classmates whose lives were cut short in first grade. The principal read their names aloud, asked the graduates to remember them today and every day, and then the room held its breath in a moment of silence. There were smiles. There were tears. The day carried a fragile mix of triumph and memory. And memory matters. The survivors carry more than diplomas. Some have decided to devote their lives to service. One wants to become a therapist so she can help children who face trauma. Others joined advocacy groups focused on school safety, mental health awareness, and gun violence prevention. What they experienced as young children has become part of the story they tell themselves about purpose. The pain did not vanish, but for many, it became a catalyst. In Newtown, a physical space now holds vigil for the lives lost. The Sandy Hook Permanent Memorial opened to the public in November 2022, a circular stone and water memorial nestled amid trees and stillness, each of the victims' names engraved. At its